The year was 2157, and humanity had long since left the cradle of Earth, extending its reach to the furthest corners of the galaxy. Spaceships darted between stars, colonies thrived on distant planets, and ancient alien ruins lay scattered across the universe, ripe for exploration. It was a golden age of discovery, where the mysteries of the cosmos unfolded daily, revealing new wonders and dangers alike. Among the newest finds was planet Kilora, a barren, desolate world far from any trade routes or inhabited systems. The planet had once been home to an advanced civilization, but its towering cities and sprawling technology had been reduced to dust by the passage of millennia. Now, it was little more than a graveyard of stone and forgotten machines. The Federation's archaeological division had sent a team to Kilora to search for relics of this civilization, believed to be the Xantorians, an ancient race spoken of only in myths and hushed warnings. Known for their military might, the Xantorians had ruled vast sectors of the galaxy before vanishing without a trace in the aftermath of the Great War. Their enemies, the Goria, had suffered a similar fate, leaving only ruins and lost technologies behind. The excavation site was deep within the heart of a long-collapsed city, where the winds howled across the cracked landscape. Dust storms choked the sky, and jagged spires of blackened stone jutted out of the ground like the bones of a dead giant. The crew had spent weeks sifting through the debris, uncovering artifacts and long-dormant machines, but nothing of significance had been found until now. The ground shook violently as a massive piece of machinery was unearthed. The team stood around the excavation pit, staring at the thing they had uncovered. It was a stasis pod, unlike anything they had seen before, nearly the size of a small ship, adorned with strange, intricate markings that pulsed faintly with energy. The surface was smooth and cold, yet humming with the faintest trace of life. The symbols were unmistakable Xantorian. This is it," gasped Dr. Rhodes, the lead archaeologist, his eyes wide with awe. "We found something far beyond the usual relics. This could change everything." "Should we open it?" asked one of the junior scientists, her voice trembling with both excitement and fear. The team exchanged nervous glances. Federation protocol was clear: any find this significant had to be analyzed before opening. But the temptation was too great. What lay inside could be the key to understanding the Xantorians' technology, their history, perhaps even the secret of their disappearance. Lieutenant Mara Quinn stood on the edge of the pit, staring down at the pod. She was young, barely 30, with sharp features and short-cropped dark hair. Her eyes gleamed with curiosity as she scanned the pod, her fingers instinctively twitching as if ready to interact with it. Mara had always been drawn to the mysteries of the past, to the unknown. She wasn't one to play it safe, and her fascination with the Xantorians bordered on obsession. "Why is it still active?" she asked, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the crew. "This tech is ancient. By all accounts, it should be dead. What's keeping it alive?" Dr. Rhodes shot her a glance. "That's precisely why we need to study it carefully. Whatever is inside could be dangerous. Or valuable," Mara countered. Her curiosity was piqued. The pod felt alive. She could feel a faint energy coming from it, almost like a pulse. The excavation crew set up scanning equipment around the pod, carefully monitoring the energy readings. The air grew tense as they prepared to open it. The pod hissed, steam billowing from the seams as the ancient mechanisms groaned to life. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the pod cracked open. A rush of cold air flooded the chamber, and from within the swirling mist, a shape began to emerge. It was enormous, easily twice the size of a man, covered in dark, thick fur. Massive muscles rippled beneath its hide, and four glowing, ice-blue eyes slowly blinked to life, scanning its surroundings with a terrifying intensity. A collective gasp echoed around the excavation site. "What is that?" whispered one of the crew members, his voice shaking. The creature took a step forward, its huge, clawed paws silent as it moved across the stone floor. Its face was wolf-like but broader, more predatory, with rows of razor-sharp teeth visible beneath its snarling lips. It growled, low and deep, a sound that reverberated through the ground like a distant earthquake. Dr. Rhodes stumbled back, his face pale with fear. "It's a Fenris," he whispered. "An Xantorian war dog." The name alone struck fear into the hearts of the crew. Fenrises were the stuff of legend, biogenetically engineered beasts created for battle. They were designed to be the perfect soldiers, loyal, deadly, and nearly indestructible. It was said that only the Xantorians could control them, and even then, only barely. Everyone instinctively backed away, scrambling to get behind the reinforced barriers that had been set up for safety. They knew the tales of how a single Fenris could tear through an entire platoon, its rage unstoppable once unleashed. But one person didn't move. Lieutenant Mara Quinn stood her ground, staring at the beast as it emerged fully from the pod. The creature turned its gaze toward her, its blue eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, Mara felt a strange connection, something primal, as if the beast were measuring her, trying to decide what she was. The Fenris growled again, the sound vibrating through Mara's chest. Her heart raced, but she didn't move. She raised her hand slowly, palm out, a gesture of peace. The crew behind her shouted warnings, begging her to step back, but Mara ignored them. "It's okay," she whispered softly, as if speaking to a lost animal rather than a war machine. "I'm not going to hurt you." The beast hesitated, its glowing eyes narrowing. The tension in the air was suffocating, as if the entire universe was holding its breath. Then, something unexpected happened. The Fenris lowered its head slightly, a gesture that could only be interpreted as submission. It sniffed the air around Mara, then took a step closer, its massive body radiating heat. Mara could feel the fear from the others behind her, but she didn't care. She was entranced by the creature, by the strange, ancient intelligence she saw in its eyes. I think it trusts me," she murmured, almost in disbelief. Dr. Rhodes shook his head furiously. "No, Quinn, get away from it. That thing is a weapon. You don't know what it's capable of." But Mara didn't listen. For reasons she couldn't explain, she felt no fear. There was something more to this beast, something beneath the surface. She could sense that the creature wasn't just a mindless killer. It had been trained for war, yes, but there was intelligence there, a spark of understanding. "You're not just a weapon, are you?" Mara said softly, her eyes never leaving the creature's. The Fenris huffed, the air from its nostrils ruffling her uniform, and for the first time, its growling stopped. "Maybe," Mara whispered, a smile tugging at her lips, "you're just looking for someone to follow." And in that moment, Mara knew that the discovery they had made was far more important than any ancient technology or forgotten history. This was a creature of legend, but it was also alive, and it had chosen her. The others were terrified, but Mara Quinn felt something different. She felt the beginning of a bond that would change everything. Over the next few days, Thorn, the name Mara Quinn had given the massive Xantorian war dog, became the focus of intense study. The creature's towering frame and primal power struck fear into everyone who laid eyes on him. Scientists, engineers, and soldiers alike kept their distance, whispering rumors about the dangers he posed. But despite the tension, Thorn never lashed out. The connection between Mara and Thorn deepened with each passing hour. While the rest of the team viewed the Fenris with suspicion and fear, Mara saw something far more complex, a creature caught between its past as a war machine and its present as a relic in a world that no longer understood it. From the very beginning, Thorn only seemed to trust her. After the stasis pod had opened, the Federation base on Kilora went into high alert. Armed guards patrolled the corridors around the containment room where Thorn now resided, weapons at the ready. But the massive creature didn't need a cage or force fields. His loyalty to Mara kept him calm. Whenever she approached, the low rumble in his throat would turn into a soft growl of recognition, and his tense muscles would relax. But when anyone else came near, even the slightest approach from a scientist or soldier, Thorne's eyes narrowed, and his growl deepened into a warning. The others were afraid, and with good reason. They knew the legends. A single Fenris had been said to destroy an entire fleet of Gorian warships during the height of the Great War. One wrong move could turn Thorne into an unstoppable force. Yet, as long as Mara was around, Thorne remained docile. Mara spent hours in the lab, ignoring the skeptical glances and whispered conversations. She didn't care what anyone thought. What mattered to her was understanding the creature that had placed its trust in her. Thorne was more than just a war machine. He was intelligent, almost eerily so. Every interaction between them seemed like a conversation in a language she didn't fully understand but was slowly learning. "Do you think he remembers?" Mara asked aloud one day, standing in front of Thorne's containment unit. His massive head turned, eyes glowing with that ever-present, cold light. Dr. Rhodes, standing several feet behind her with his datapad, shook his head. "Remember what? The war? The Xantorians? Those events are thousands of years in the past, Lieutenant. The stasis technology is remarkable, but I doubt the creature retained coherent memories." Mara glanced back at him, then turned to Thorne, who watched her intently. "I'm not so sure," she said quietly. "He's not just an animal. He's thinking. I can feel it." Dr. Rhodes sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Mara, I understand that you formed some sort of connection with it, but you're projecting human traits onto a bioweapon. The Fenris was engineered for one purpose: to destroy. That's why it's so dangerous." "Dangerous," Mara repeated, nodding slightly. "Yeah, he is. But that's not all he is." With a soft hum of the door mechanism, Mara stepped into Thorne's containment area. The other scientists gasped as Thorne's massive head swiveled toward her. He let out a low, guttural growl, a warning not directed at Mara, but at anyone foolish enough to follow her inside. "See? He's just wary of you," she said, her voice soft but confident. Mara moved closer to the creature, her footsteps echoing slightly in the sterile, metallic chamber. Thorne lowered his head as she approached, his four eyes watching her with something that almost seemed like curiosity. Slowly, she reached out and placed her hand on his broad snout. Thorne huffed, his breath warm against her skin. "I know you're not just a weapon," she whispered, stroking the thick fur beneath his jaw. "You were made for war, but you're more than that now. We'll figure this out." Thorne closed his eyes for a brief moment, almost as if he understood. Mara could feel the tension in the room fade away, replaced by a strange, calming presence. She had never felt this close to any living creature before, certainly not one so dangerous. Over the following days, Mara became Thorne's caretaker. She fed him, studied him, and even trained with him, slowly learning how to read his body language. Thorne's loyalty to her was unquestionable, and Mara couldn't help but marvel at the depth of their bond. He responded to her voice, to her movements, and even seemed to mirror her emotions. But not everyone was as optimistic. Captain Raleigh, the Federation officer in charge of the research base, was growing increasingly concerned. A tall, gruff man with a no-nonsense demeanor, Raleigh had been a soldier for most of his life. He wasn't thrilled about a dangerous, ancient war creature roaming the base, even under Mara's watch. "Lieutenant Quinn, we need to talk," Raleigh said one morning as Mara finished feeding Thorne. His arms were crossed, and his stern gaze was fixed on her as she exited the containment chamber. Mara wiped her hands on her uniform and sighed. "Captain, if this is about Thorne again, I've already dashed." "It is about Thorne," Raleigh interrupted, his voice sharp. "I've given you a lot of leeway because of the reports about the bond you've developed with it. But this situation is getting out of hand." "I have everything under control, sir," Mara said, trying to keep her tone calm. "Thorne hasn't shown any signs of aggression. He's cooperative." Raleigh's frown deepened. "Cooperative for now, but he's a ticking time bomb, Lieutenant. You think you've tamed it, but the second it decides to turn, you won't be able to stop it. Neither will anyone else on this base. He's not going to turn, Mara insisted. He's more than just a war dog, Captain. He's intelligent. He's learning. I don't care how intelligent it is, Raleigh snapped. The safety of this base and everyone on it is my responsibility. If you can't control that thing, dash. I can, Mara said, stepping closer. Thorn trusts me. And if you give me more time, I think I can reach him even more. He's not a threat. Raleigh looked at her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. The Federation Council doesn't see it that way. They're sending a team to review the situation. There's talk of putting him back into stasis permanently. Mara felt her stomach drop. You can't do that. If they lock him away again, it'll destroy him. He's already starting to adjust to this world. You can't just treat him like some artifact. Raleigh's expression softened for just a moment, a flicker of sympathy crossing his face. I understand how you feel, Mara. But this is beyond us now. The Council wants results, and they don't care about the bond you formed. Mara's hands clenched into fists. She couldn't let that happen. Thorn wasn't just some relic to be sealed away again. He was alive, thinking, feeling. He had chosen her, and she wasn't going to abandon him. Give me time, Captain, she said firmly. Just a few more days. Let me prove he's not dangerous. Raleigh hesitated, then nodded slowly. You've got 72 hours. If I don't see significant progress by then, the Federation team will take over. And they won't be as patient as I've been. Mara watched him walk away, her heart pounding. She knew the clock was ticking. The Federation would never see Thorn as anything other than a weapon, a threat. But to her, Thorn was more than that. He was her partner. As she turned back to Thorn's chamber, the creature's eyes followed her every move, calm and watchful. We'll figure this out, big guy, she whispered to him through the glass. Thorn growled softly, as if responding to her promise. But Mara couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out and that something far more dangerous than the Federation was coming. It had been just over 48 hours since Captain Raleigh had given Mara her ultimatum, prove that Thorn was not a threat or face losing him to Federation stasis. But in those 2 days, the situation had become much more complicated. Mara stood in the command center of the Federation outpost on Kilora, watching a holographic display of the galaxy. A series of red dots blinked ominously at the edge of the star map, slowly inching closer to the outer colonies of human space. The red dots represented a Gorian invasion fleet, their warships numbering in the dozens, massive battleships, carriers, and fighter craft, all moving in coordinated formations. They're coming for him, aren't they? Mara muttered to herself, staring at the display in disbelief. Captain Raleigh, who stood beside her, nodded grimly. His normally calm demeanor had darkened with the severity of the situation. Intel suggests that the Goria fleet has been mobilized for one purpose: retrieving an artifact of Xantorian origin. Mara swallowed, knowing full well what that artifact was. Thorn. The Goria were an ancient enemy of the Xantorians, thought to be as extinct as the race they had fought in the Great War thousands of years ago. But now, they had resurfaced, and they weren't just after Thorn, they were looking to finish a conflict that had started eons ago. We intercepted a transmission from the Goria High Command, Raleigh said, his voice low. They know about Thorn. They're demanding we turn him over, or else they'll destroy this entire outpost and every human colony in their path. Mara's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't let Thorn fall into their hands. Thorn was more than just a war machine. He was intelligent, sentient. But to the Goria, he was a weapon of immeasurable value, one that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. If they reclaimed him, it wouldn't just mean death for her and the people on this base, it would mean galactic war. Raleigh folded his arms, his brow furrowed. The Federation Council has been briefed. They're weighing their options. But let's be honest, Quinn, the odds aren't in our favor. The Goria outnumber us 10-1. If we don't give them what they want, they'll burn this planet to the ground. Mara clenched her fists, rage simmering inside her. So, what? We just hand Thorn over to them? He's not a bargaining chip. He's a living creature. Raleigh's gaze softened slightly, but he remained resolute. I don't want to turn him over either, but we don't have much of a choice. If we try to fight, we'll be obliterated. Then we don't let them take him, Mara said, her voice firm. We find another way. Another way? Raleigh echoed with a grim chuckle. You're asking me to defy the Council, to go up against an entire Gorian fleet with one war beast and a handful of soldiers? Mara straightened, a surge of determination filling her. You've seen what Thorn can do. He's not just some mindless weapon. He's strategic. He understands things on a level none of us could predict. He's our best chance to stop them. Raleigh looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. You really believe in this thing, don't you? Mara didn't hesitate. Yes. He chose me. I trust him. And if we work together, we might have a shot. The captain rubbed the back of his neck, clearly torn between his duty to the Federation and the terrifying reality of what was coming. Finally, he exhaled deeply. All right, Quinn. You've got my support for now. But we'll need more than just hope if we're going to fight the Goria. We need a plan. Mara felt a flicker of relief. They weren't giving up yet. She had to move fast, though. The Goria ships were closing in, and they had less than a week before the invasion reached Kilora. Her first stop was Thorn's containment chamber. The massive creature had been restless since the base had intercepted the Goria transmission. His glowing blue eyes followed Mara as she entered the room, his growl low and rumbling. You can feel it, can't you? Mara said softly, approaching him without hesitation. They're coming for you. Thorn snorted, his breath hot against her hand as she placed it on his snout. There was a tension in his stance, a readiness that reminded Mara just how dangerous he could be when provoked. Yet he remained calm around her. It was a strange and powerful thing, the bond they shared. I'm not going to let them take you, Mara promised, looking into Thorn's eyes. But we need to prepare. If we're going to survive this, we have to be ready to fight. The creature's eyes narrowed slightly, and Mara could almost feel his agreement. Thorn knew the stakes just as well as she did. He had fought in the Great War millennia ago, after all. This wasn't just about survival, it was about finishing something he had been a part of long before humans had even discovered the Xantorian ruins. That night, Mara worked tirelessly in the lab, reviewing the data they had gathered from the ruins Thorn had led her to. The ancient Xantorian technology stored there was still functional, though much of it had been decaying for centuries. But within the crumbling vaults, Mara had discovered something extraordinary, an energy weapon, dormant for thousands of years, but still intact. A massive, mobile shield generator designed for planetary defense. If she could figure out how to power it up, it might give them the edge they needed to fend off the Goria fleet. With Thorn's help, Mara spent hours in the vaults, testing the ancient devices and recalibrating the technology. Thorn seemed to know these weapons, guiding her with subtle gestures and growls. It was as though he remembered their purpose, the way they had been used in the Great War. By the third day, Mara had successfully activated the shield generator. The device hummed to life, sending out a wave of energy that enveloped the base in a protective barrier. It wasn't enough to stop an entire fleet, but it would buy them time. Time for Thorn to do what he did best. The Goria fleet arrived sooner than expected, their warships descending from the skies like shadowy titans. The energy shield flickered as the first barrage of laser fire hit, but it held strong. Mara stood on the command deck, watching the battle unfold through the holographic display. Thorn was beside her, his muscles tense, his eyes glowing brighter than ever. We've got maybe an hour before the shield fails, Raleigh reported grimly, his voice crackling over the intercom. We need to make our move now. Mara nodded, glancing at Thorn. Are you ready? Thorn growled, his eyes locking onto hers. He was more than ready, he was waiting. The plan was simple, but dangerous. While the Federation forces defended the base, Mara and Thorn would lead a small strike team to infiltrate the Goya command ship. If they could take out the Goya commander, the fleet might retreat. Mara and Thorn boarded a sleek, blackened dropship, the engines humming to life as it soared into the sky. The team with her was tense, their faces pale, but Mara remained focused. Beside her, Thorn sat calmly, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. And maybe he had. The dropship broke through the atmosphere, dodging Goya fighters and weaving between blasts of energy fire. The sight of the Goya warships filled the skies, massive and menacing, but Mara wasn't afraid. Not with Thorn at her side. As they approached the command ship, Mara felt a surge of adrenaline. Let's do this. The ship's hull loomed ahead, and with a deafening crash, the dropship docked, slicing into the Goya command vessel. Mara leaped out, Thorn charging ahead like a living battering ram. The Goya soldiers barely had time to react before Thorn was upon them, his claws ripping through their ranks with lethal precision. Mara followed close behind, her blaster firing in sync with Thorn's movements. They cut through the Goya soldiers like a well-practiced team, Thorn's primal strength matched by Mara's tactical precision. But the real challenge lay ahead, the Goya commander. As they breached the command bridge, Mara locked eyes with the towering figure before her. Clad in dark, spiked armor, the Goya commander stood at least 7 feet tall, his cold, yellow eyes narrowing as he saw Thorn. So, the commander hissed, his voice dripping with malice, the Xantorian war dog lives. Thorn growled, low and deadly, but Mara spoke first. He's not yours anymore. The commander's lips twisted into a cruel smile. He was never yours to begin with, human. The battle was on. Thorn lunged forward with terrifying speed, but the commander was fast, too fast. He dodged Thorn's attack, striking back with a pulse blade that crackled with energy. Mara fired her blaster, but the commander deflected the shots with ease. It was clear now this wasn't just any Goya commander. He had faced Thorn's kind before, during the ancient war. He knew how to fight them. But Thorn was different now. He wasn't alone. Mara fired again, distracting the commander just long enough for Thorn to strike. With a powerful leap, Thorn pinned the commander to the ground, his massive claws poised to strike. You've lost, Mara said, her voice calm but firm. The Goya commander sneered up at her. This war is far from over, human. With one final, swift motion, Thorn's claws came down, and the commander was silenced forever. The battle was won, but the war, as the commander had warned, was just beginning. Mara stood beside Thorn, breathing heavily as they looked out at the retreating Goya ships. The day had been won, but the galaxy was vast, and the Goya would not stop until they reclaimed what they thought was theirs. Mara placed a hand on Thorn's side, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. Together, they had faced an ancient enemy, and together, they would face whatever came next. The aftermath of the battle felt surreal. The Goya fleet, once a looming threat in the skies of Kilora, had withdrawn, their forces shattered by the unexpected alliance between a lone human and the last Xantorian war dog. But Mara knew this wasn't the end. It was merely a reprieve. The Goya would regroup, rebuild, and come back stronger, hungrier. Their defeat today would only fuel their desire for vengeance. The command center of the Federation base buzzed with activity as reports of the Goya retreat came flooding in. Captain Raleigh, though visibly relieved, was still cautious. We pushed them back, but they're not done with us. They'll come for Thorn again. And next time, they won't make the same mistakes. Mara stood next to Raleigh, her eyes scanning the map of the galaxy displayed on the holographic table in front of them. Thorn was just outside, standing guard like an ancient sentinel, his glowing blue eyes constantly watching for any threats. The base personnel, still uneasy around him, gave him a wide berth. "We can't stay here," Mara said firmly, crossing her arms. "We need to take the fight to them. Sitting here, waiting for them to return, is a death sentence. They'll come with a bigger fleet next time." Raleigh's brow furrowed. "And what exactly are you proposing, Lieutenant?" "We're talking about an entire Goryeo war fleet. The Federation is already stretched thin. Our reinforcements won't arrive for weeks." Mara's mind raced. The Xantorian technology they had uncovered had helped them survive this time, but it wouldn't be enough to hold off another attack, let alone a full-scale invasion. However, in the vaults of the Xantorian ruins, there was still untapped potential, ancient weapons and devices beyond anything the Federation had seen. Thorn had guided her through some of it, but she had a feeling there was much more. "We go after them," Mara said, her voice steady. "We take Thorn, and we go to the heart of their territory. If we strike before they can regroup, we might have a chance to end this." Raleigh stared at her like she just suggested flying into a black hole. "You want to take a single war dog and challenge an entire fleet on their own turf? That's madness." Mara didn't flinch. "Thorn isn't just a war dog. You've seen what he can do. And he knows the Goryeo. He fought them before, in the Great War. He's our only shot." The room fell silent as Raleigh considered her words. Finally, he sighed, his face hardening. "Even if I were to agree with this bold plan, the Council will never approve it. The official directive is to protect Federation assets and wait for reinforcements. They don't understand the threat like we do," Mara pressed. "If we wait, they'll wipe us out. But if we hit them hard and fast, we can disrupt their command structure, weaken their forces. Thorn and I can do this." Raleigh rubbed his temple, clearly torn between protocol and the harsh reality of the situation. After a long pause, he finally nodded. "All right, Quinn. I'll authorize a small strike team to go with you. But this is off the record. The Council cannot know we're defying orders." Mara felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you, sir. We won't let you down." Within hours, preparations were underway. Mara, Thorn, and a hand-picked team of elite Federation soldiers boarded a sleek, heavily modified starship, its hull designed for speed and stealth. The mission was simple but incredibly dangerous: infiltrate Goryeo space, locate their central command, and strike at the heart of their war machine. As the ship broke through the atmosphere of Kilora, Mara stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars ahead. Thorn was beside her, his massive form calm and alert. The soldiers on board, though tense, had grown accustomed to Thorn's presence, no longer flinching every time he moved. They knew their lives depended on him just as much as they depended on Mara. "We're entering Goryeo territory," the pilot reported, the lights on the bridge dimming as they engaged the ship's cloaking systems. Mara's fingers tightened around the edge of the console. This was it. The Goryeo wouldn't be expecting an attack so soon, but they would still be on high alert. The element of surprise was their only advantage. "Bring up the scans," she ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the vast network of Goryeo ships and stations spread across their home system. It was a formidable sight, hundreds of warships and defenses positioned in strategic formations. At the center of it all was the Goryeo flagship the Black Sun, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons and reinforced shields. "That's our target," Mara said, her gaze fixed on the looming ship. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances. "That thing's a fortress," one of them muttered. "How do we get close without being vaporized?" Mara's expression remained steely. "We don't fight them head-on. Thorn and I will infiltrate the ship and take out their command structure from the inside. While we do that, the rest of you will create a diversion." Raleigh's voice crackled over the comms from the base. "Quinn, I hope you know what you're doing. This isn't a fight you can afford to lose." Mara glanced at Thorn, who was already preparing, his muscles tense, his eyes glowing with determination. We won't lose. The infiltration went as planned at first. Mara, Thorn, and the strike team slipped past the outer defenses, the stealth systems of their ship masking them from the Gorya's scanners. The soldiers planted charges on key structures, creating chaos as explosions rocked the outer defenses. The Gorya fleet scrambled to respond, thinning the defenses around the Black Sun. Mara and Thorn slipped aboard the dreadnought during the confusion, navigating through dark, metallic corridors filled with the low hum of alien machinery. Thorn moved with terrifying grace for a creature his size, his senses attuned to every sound, every flicker of movement. Mara followed close behind, her blaster ready, her heart pounding in her chest. They encountered resistance almost immediately. Gorya soldiers, armed and ready. But they weren't prepared for Thorn. He tore through them with lethal precision, his claws flashing, his growls reverberating through the ship's walls. Mara fired in sync with his movements, each shot finding its mark. They were a team, perfectly synchronized in their assault. As they pushed deeper into the ship, the Gorya forces grew more desperate. They knew what was at stake. But Mara and Thorn were relentless, cutting down anyone who stood in their way. Finally, they reached the command center. The doors slid open, revealing the heart of Gorya's war machine. Standing at the center of the room was a figure clad in dark, ceremonial armor. General Kildar, the leader of the Gorya forces. His eyes, glowing yellow with malice, fixed on Thorn with recognition. So, the last of the Xantorian dogs has come to die, Kildar sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. And you've brought a human with you. How fitting. Thorn let out a low, menacing growl, his blue eyes locked on the Gorya general. Mara stepped forward, her blaster aimed at Kildar. This ends now. Kildar laughed, a cold, cruel sound. You think you can end us? We are the Gorya. We have fought for millennia. Your federation is nothing. And as for you, War Dog, your kind failed once before, and you will fail again. Mara's grip tightened on her blaster. Not today. With a roar, Thorn lunged at Kildar, but the general was fast. He dodged Thorn's strike, his own blade flashing as it clashed against Thorn's claws. The room erupted into chaos as the two titans clashed, their battle shaking the very walls of the ship. Mara fired at the Gorya soldiers attempting to flank them, but her focus remained on Thorn. The fight was brutal, each blow sending shockwaves through the air. Kildar fought with ruthless precision, but Thorn's strength and fury were unmatched. It was a battle of sheer willpower, one that only one of them could win. With a final, devastating strike, Thorn slammed Kildar into the ground, his claws pinning the Gorya general to the floor. The battle was over. You've lost, Mara said, stepping closer, her blaster trained on the fallen general. Kildar coughed, blood trickling from his mouth, but his eyes gleamed with defiance. You think this is over? There will always be more like me. Mara looked down at him, her expression cold. Not if we stop you here. With a nod, Thorn crushed Kildar beneath his weight, ending the Gorya threat once and for all. The return to Kilora was bittersweet. The Gorya fleet, now leaderless, had scattered. The battle was won, but Mara knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and the Gorya were just one of many threats lurking in its shadows. As the starship touched down on the base, Mara looked over at Thorn. He was scarred, weary from the battle, but still standing tall. He had fought not just for her, but for something greater, a future beyond the war that had once defined him. We did it, Mara whispered, her hand resting on Thorn's side. Thorn rumbled softly in response, his eyes glowing faintly with something that felt like pride. Together, they had faced an ancient enemy. And together, they would face whatever came next, because the bond between them, forged in battle and trust, was unbreakable. As they walked into the sunset of Kilora, Mara knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning of their story.